Today is Monday, the 16th of November, 2020. It's around 9 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Jake Morphonios with the Blackstone Intelligence Report. If you're looking at Drudge Report, the headlines out there right now are quite shocking. Trump grand finale, bomb Iran. Advisors warn war risk. Now, if you've been following what I've been talking about for years, the Zionist push to get Donald Trump to strike Iran, or at the very least to stand back, let Israel strike Iran, and have the USA back Israel, kind of like what they did in the Israeli strike against the nuclear facilities of Iraq years ago. Well, this is to be expected. And you've seen my recent live streams. We've been talking about this all week long. What's going on was the firing of Defense Secretary Mark Esper and purging his people, and these high-level talks between Elliot Abrams and Mike Pompeo with Israeli leaders and Saudi intelligence. Was all of this something to prepare for a strike against Iran? And the answer is yes, it was. What I'm going to do is read one of these articles to you and just leave it at that. I've not dug into this yet. I'm getting ready to go watch the latest episode of Mandalorian with my kids, but I did want to at least share this with you real quick. So what we're going to do is just pull this one up. There's a couple articles out there. I'll just read this one to you. Donald Trump was talked out of launching a missile strike on Iran's main nuclear site by his top advisors last week, who warned it could trigger a war. Let's go in here. And this article is from the Daily Mail. President Donald Trump considered launching a strike against Iran's main nuclear facility last week before senior advisors talked him out of the dramatic action, according to two new reports. Trump asked top national security aides, including Vice President Mike Pence, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Acting Defense Secretary Christopher C. Miller, who had just been brought in, and Chairman of Joint Chiefs Mark Milley, about the potential strike at a meeting in the Oval Office last Thursday, the New York Times reported Monday, citing four current and former U.S. officials. The meeting took place a day after international inspectors informed United Nations members that Iran had significantly increased its stockpile of nuclear material. Trump's advisors ultimately dissuaded him from launching a strike by warning that such an action could trigger a wider conflict with Iran, the Times sources said. They said any strike, either by missile or cyber, would likely have targeted Iran's main nuclear site, Natanz. A separate source confirms the Times' account of the meeting to Reuters, saying, quote, Trump asked for options. They gave him the scenarios, and he ultimately decided not to go forward. And here's a couple pictures. Pence, Pompeo, you can see Milley down the bottom left, and Acting Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller, bottom right. Here is the Natanz fuel enrichment plant in Iran. New centrifuge assembly workshop. The International Atomic Energy Agency, which is the IAEA, a watchdog for the United Nations, reported in a confidential document last Wednesday that Iran's uranium stockpile is now 12 times larger than the limits set under the nuclear accord Trump pulled out of in 2018. The agency said that as of November 2nd, Iran had a stockpile of 2,442.9 kilograms of low-enriched uranium, up from 4,641.6 pounds reported on August 25th. The nuclear deal signed in 2015 with the U.S., Germany, France, Britain, China, and Russia, known as the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, allows Iran only to keep a stockpile of 447 pounds. The IAEA reported that Iran has also been continuing to enrich uranium to a purity of up to 4.5%, higher than the 3.67% allowed under the deal, which promises Iran economic incentives in exchange for the curbs on its nuclear program. The agency also said that Iran had barred its inspectors from accessing another site where there was evidence of past nuclear activity. The officials who spoke to the Times said Trump reacted to the IAEA report by asking his aides about what options he had to respond to Iran's nuclear expansion. They said Pompeo and Milley outlined the risks of military escalation and that officials left the meeting with the impression that Trump had been dissuaded from launching a missile attack. Iran has openly announced all violations of the nuclear deal in advance, which has followed the decision by the U.S. to pull out unilaterally in 2018. Since the U.S. withdrawal and imposition of new sanctions, Tehran has been putting pressure on the remaining parties with the violations to come up with new ways to offset the economy-crippling sanctions by Washington. Let me give you a real quick recap of really what all has happened and what's going on. During the Obama administration, there was a widespread effort to avoid potential future nuclear war with Iran. Iran had not expressed any serious interest in any kind of nuclear war, but Israel, their regional arch enemy, is a nuclear power, thanks to, the Mossad working to steal nuclear secrets from the United States. They used Robert Maxwell, the father of Ghislaine Maxwell, who was buddies with Donald Trump. Robert Maxwell was a Mossad super spy who facilitated the theft of this intellectual property, nuclear secrets, and transferred those to Israel. But anyway, to avoid a problem in the future, Iran, of course, wants what many other nations want, which is energy independence. They want to be able to provide cheap, clean energy to their citizens. Nuclear energy is what is used by nation after nation around the world. There's just no reason that Iran should not, as a sovereign nation, be able to decide that they want to use nuclear energy for themselves. But because of all the warmongering, all the propaganda against Iran being this terrible, evil, awful, whatever, which is just propaganda because the United States wants their oil, and to push them out of competition with Saudi Arabia and so on and so forth, stuff I've detailed many times in the past. The propaganda is put forward that the reason that Iran wants nuclear power is to build weapons to blow up everybody. Iran, they're just a bunch of terrorists. They just want to kill everyone. That's why they want to enrich uranium. Iran said that is not true. So over the years, especially during the George W. Bush administration, heavy, crippling sanctions were put on Iran. These sanctions continued into the Obama years, but cooler heads prevailed, not just in the United States, but the UK, France, all over the place. The Western European powers got together and said, look, Iran ought to be able to have nuclear energy. That's their right to do so. But we don't want them to have nuclear weapons, which, again, is really Iran's right to do so if you really think about it. Iran can choose to have whatever weapons they want. I always get so freaking mad at watching Trump supporters and previously George W. Bush supporters talking about, we don't want the government telling us what to do, what kind of weapons we can have, no restrictions on our guns. We can have any guns we want. It's our God-given right as human beings to defend ourselves. Unless, of course, you're Iranian. Then you only get to have the weapons that America tells you can have. It's just total hypocrisy. But let's set that aside. Iran wants the energy. They have the capability to enrich uranium, but it goes through a process. You have to enrich it at certain levels before it can become material used in a nuclear warhead. And you've got to have the ICBMs, the intercontinental ballistic missiles, capable of sending it over to, say, the United States or deep into Europe, something like that. So you've got these various things. Iran sits down at the table with these representatives of the United States, the Obama administration, leaders of Europe, and they work out a deal. The deal is this. All of these heavy sanctions, there will be relief, meaning the U.S. will free up unfreeze a lot of the billions of dollars in assets that we have tied up in banks around the world, freezing the assets of the nation of Iran, the government of Iran, as well as prominent government officials and so forth. We will free that up on the condition that you allow the IAEA in to inspect and verify that you are not progressing beyond a certain point. You're not producing more uranium, or you're not enriching more uranium than what is allowed. That way, there can be international consensus, international comfort, knowing that Iran is not building nuclear weapons. If you will abide by these strict requirements, then we will loosen the crippling economic war that the West is waging against Iran, that is having a detrimental impact on the people. Not just an issue of money, but their inability, massive trade restrictions to where Iran cannot purchase or import basic necessities, different kinds of medicines and food and so forth. So they all sit down, they form the JCPOA and agree to it. The United States was certified after every inspection. A report would be produced by the United States verifying, or by the IAEA, and then also a report from the United States verifying that, yes, Iran is obeying this deal. Meaning they are not moving in the direction of nuclear weapons. They're only enriching uranium in a way that can be used for energy for the nation. Over and over and over and over again, Iran was certified as respecting these restrictions. At no point, even during Donald Trump's administration, at no point did Iran ever violate one iota of restriction that was placed on it under this deal. You see, those who pushed for the deal thought this was a good idea. If this was really about trying to prevent nuclear war or the development of nuclear weapons, if that was the goal of the Iran deal, it achieved it. Now, if the goal is to keep Iran weak, to keep them from having the energy that they need, to keep them from progressing, to keep them economically ruined, then no, this deal doesn't guarantee that. Which is why the hardliners, the Zionists, the neocons, the government of Israel, that's why they hate the Iran deal. And so they pushed and pushed and pushed every way they could, trying to get Iran to violate the deal. They couldn't do it. Iran said, we will continue to abide by this because we are not trying to get nuclear weapons, no matter what you're saying. So when Donald Trump became president, what do? The United States withdrew from the deal. Trump said, we don't care, even though his own administration was verifying that Iran was following the deal. Trump said, it's a bad deal, I'm pulling out. Excuse me. So Iran, and this is devastating because when the United States pulls out and returns to these heavy sanctions, well, most of the damage that was being done to Iran to begin with was the United States. It was our economic war against them, was the preponderance of the weight of what was causing harm to Iran's economy and to the people. So when the United States under Trump returned to this aggressive economic war against Iran, Iran made it clear. They said, look, we're going to return to developing uranium at a faster pace than what you're comfortable with. It still won't be anywhere near what could develop a nuclear weapon with, but we're not going to follow this. If you don't, we're going to try. We're going to try for as long as is economically viable for us. And European leaders tried to step up and say, look, we will do what we can to make up the difference that to you economically, so that you will stay in this deal, because the European leaders knew this was a good deal. And they tried, but then the United States, under the Trump administration, pressured these European countries, started pushing back against them economically, squeezing them. And so the support gradually began to fade. And Iran publicly notified these countries, and the United States told everybody, we are now going to bump it up to this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And this has been over a period of years. We are very, very likely going to see Iran return back to the former restrictions, as the Iran deal will end up being renegotiated under the Biden administration. Israel knows this. And that is why they have pressured Donald Trump to strike now. Just go in there, hit their nuclear facilities, and blow it up. We'll just call it terrorism. And so remember, I told you this when I was seeing all of the propaganda happening all at once, all over the place, coordinated between Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Israel, of course, the United States, even European media, all at once, coordinated effort to demonize Iran. So here we are. Exactly. These Zionists are so predictable. They pride themselves, the Mossad prides itself on being so secretive. By deception thou shalt do war. Well, they do strive to deceive. And unfortunately, the overwhelming majority of Americans who hear about this, and especially Trump supporters, who used to be anti-war, who used to be non-interventionists, who wanted wars ended, guarantee you, the overwhelming majority of Trumpers are going to follow whatever QAnon bullcrap comes out demonizing Iran. They're going to follow whatever, glorious Israel tells them to believe, all these evangelicals. And they are going to be beating the drums of war if Trump comes out and starts demagoguing, if he starts saying we need to go after them because they're terrorists and Iran is going to kill us all, and pulls that George W. Bush crap. Like they did with Saddam Hussein about, yeah, they're not really doing anything, but we need to go hit them anyway because they're terrorists working with Al-Qaeda and they'll get us. And that's why a couple days back, about a week ago, when I said, here they are suddenly out of the blue, we have a story about how the Israeli Mossad assassinated, allegedly, the number 2 member of Al-Qaeda on behalf of the United States while he was hiding out in Iran. Iran hates Al-Qaeda. Iran has spent the last 6 years fighting against Al-Qaeda all over Syria. Who do you think beat ISIS? Who do you think has been beating back the U.S.-backed, the CIA-backed Al-Qaeda affiliates from Yemen to Syria, all over the place? It's Iran. Iran is not helping or harboring Al-Qaeda. So the report was ridiculous, but that's why I said in my report, this is exactly what they did after 9/11. Moving from 2002 to 2003, talking about how, there's Al-Qaeda in Iraq, so we need to go to war because Saddam Hussein is harboring Al-Qaeda. What they failed to mention is, there were some Al-Qaeda operatives in Iraq. You know where they were? They were up working among the Kurds where the CIA was training them. So if there is any Al-Qaeda in Iran, I guarantee you the CIA and the Israeli Mossad are connected to them. So folks, we're not out of this yet. Trump's still got a couple months to go. He could still strike, and we could see Benjamin Netanyahu turn around and strike, and that, I'll tell you what, war. These war bastards are gonna kick something off that's gonna impact all of us before it's over with. And even if it doesn't affect me or you directly, these are human beings that are impacted by these bloody, horrid wars. So if you're a Trump supporter, listen, I have given you guys a hard time. You know, I have. Some of it's been in jest. Some of it is just, because I truly have a problem with some of the more fanatical elements of the Trump supporters. But set all that aside. Eye to eye, me to you, you know that the United States has got a major problem with this military-industrial complex, with this deep state apparatus that pushes the United States to go out and kill other people and overthrow other nations for the benefit of the bankers and the multinational corporations that they fund. There is no moral justification for Donald Trump to strike Iran. This is bullcrap. You know it. Worship Donald Trump all you want to, but please put the good of human beings and your own country ahead of any insane worship of Trump where you can't utter a single criticism against the man. Have the integrity to speak out in social media against war. You voted for him partly out of the expectation that he was going to get us out of Afghanistan, get us out of Iraq, right? You voted for Trump because you believed that he would end war. So if you believe in those principles, if you truly are anti-interventionist, anti-military industrial complex, anti-deep state, now is the time for you to prove it by standing against war. If you don't want to bash Trump, fine, but speak out against any effort to go to war with Iran. And same thing with Israel. If at this point, with this all out in the open, Trump may say, oh, all right, I'm not going to touch this now. But that does not mean that Israel will not repeat what it did to Iraq. Fly in there, hit the, drop some tactical nukes on Iran's nuclear facilities. I guarantee you, if Israel does that, it's going to make the rest of us less safe. It will make America less safe. It will make it'll destabilize the region worse than it already is. Let's not back any of this. It's wrong. And we should be able to set aside our partisan differences over who should be president or which political party is better. We should be able to set all that aside, stand together as Americans. Or if you're watching me from outside the United States, stand with me as a fellow human being and speak out against war. It's wrong. And our voice is raised and expressed with sufficient passion can have an influence to some degree, if only a limited one. Anything we can do to speak out and hold these criminals accountable and let them know we know what you're doing and we oppose it. We're not going to support it. We need to speak up now, not after the fact, because if we wait too long to speak out, it's too late. Let them know now. We will hold their feet to the fire. Mike Pompeo, you think you've got a chance in 2024? Dude, you have no idea how wrong you are. And if you want to make it far worse for yourself, you just take some action against Iran and see the results, see the fallout for you politically, because we will mock you relentlessly, and we will never let you live it down, you warmongering pig. All right, that's all I got for you guys. Thanks for watching. For Blackstone Intelligence, I'm Jake Morphonios.
If you appreciate hard-hitting investigative journalism that you won't get from the mainstream media, then please support Jake's research and analysis at patreon.com/End-Times News Report, paypal.me/End-Times News Report, or send a check or money order to Jake Morphonios, P.O. Box 1333, Kernersville, North Carolina 27285.